Richard, you say cities have become more livable, but that not all cities are booming. What do the successful cities do right?
Well, I think there's a few things that successful cities do right. The most important thing is that they invest in their human capital. They invest in their talented people. They have great high schools, and particularly colleges and universities. But also, the best cities are making themselves attractive for highly skilled, ambitious, and entrepreneurial people. They've brought crime rates down low. Of course, they've cleaned themselves up. They've cleaned up their pollution and their garbage and their waterfronts, and they've made themselves more livable, just as you said, Ollie.
And I just came back from China and was sort of marveling at all the infrastructure growth going on there. We've talked on this show about how Washington is dysfunctional, but even state governments, which are strapped for cash, are pushing back on infrastructure projects, which should over time return the cash to them. But we just don't seem to think that way effectively in America. So where do you get the impetus for large-scale infrastructure development in America? Things like transit, things like, you've talked about building more public transit than building highways. Where does this come from? Where should it come from, and where does it come from?
Well, I think in America we got bogged down in an inappropriate debate over economic policy. Do we loosen monetary policy? Do we stimulate? Do we do industrial policy in favor of one sector over another? Let's reframe that debate. Let's build great cities. Let's rebuild our transportation systems. Let's rebuild our crumbling airports. Let's rebuild our schools. Let's build great communities for every American. The mayors get this. The local leaders get this, and it's time for Washington. And of course, this is what China, as you said, is doing. It is building cities at an incredible rate, upgrading transportation, upgrading and improving fast rail. And I think America has the ability to do this. We've just got to get with the program.
But you say the mayors get it. That's the problem. That the money often doesn't come from the city. It needs to come from the state or the federal government or the private sector. And that seems to be the mismatch. I think every mayor in the country has some plan for how their city can do better. You're in Toronto, one of my favorite cities, needs a better subway system, needs better, you can't get to the airport by the subway. I mean, everybody's got something they want to do, but the infrastructure is not keeping up with population growth, and that's hurting commuters, for instance. A recent report from IHS Global Insights says that the 5 most congested areas in the United States are Chicago, Washington, Houston, New York, and Los Angeles. And the congestion in those areas costs commuters more than $1,000 a year. Use of public transit is growing. How do we address this?
Well, there was a great Gallup survey this week which said something like 2/3 to 3/4 of Americans have a great deal of faith in their local governments and their mayors. At the same time, where faith in Congress has hit all-time lows, approaching about 10% of us have any faith in our Congress. I think we not only need to give more power to our cities, we've got to tilt the balance in terms of revenue raising towards our cities.